Hello and happy Father's Day, 2023. I hope if your father is still with us, I hope you've at least acknowledged the day in some loving way. And it's a day that, of course, even though it's a brand new Hallmark holiday kind of thing, it is good to think about where you come from. I'm going to share a couple of things with you about my father and my relationship. My relationship, he's my father, for Christ's sake. Anyway, I gotta start off by telling you just a story. I hope you'll forgive this digression. My father was a fabulous athlete. He had regional and national track records. I forget what his event was, but he was quite the athlete. Okay, and he was a gymnast. And one of my earliest memories is he taking my brother and me out in the backyard and says, "I'm going to do this because I don't know for how much longer I'm going to be able to do this." And standing in the grass in the backyard, just standing up, not running, not jumping, not taking a leaping head start, he sprang into the air and did a full backflip and landed on his feet. It was awesome. Okay. That's the last time I saw him do that. And he always wanted my brother and I to be athletes too, okay, because when he was in high school, he competed very successfully in many events and traveled to the East Coast, to New York and Boston and other places for events, which was a pretty big thing for a very financially poor kid in Los Angeles at the time. And my brother tried as best he could to sort of fulfill the athletic dreams of my father, and he played basketball and other things, but never football or any sort of less well, I won't put football down, but anyway, we weren't football players, and he was really disappointed when it was discovered when I was about 2.5, 3 years old, that I had this hip disease, this bone disease in my hip, and that it was doctor's orders that Lonnie wasn't going to take part in any athletic activities if I was lucky enough to be able to start walking even when I was 5. But anyway, so that was a bit of a disappointment. But what my father and I both could do was golf. And I love golf. And my father was an excellent golfer. And in California, he finished with some kind of prize in several golf tournaments here or in Long Beach. And it was such a cool thing. And so when we moved to Nebraska, he immediately joined the country club, not only for business purposes, but he wanted to golf. And he taught me to golf. I didn't have my own small clubs, but I used his beautiful clubs. And we joined the provincial country club. It was a beautiful 9-hole course sort of by the Loop River area of Columbus, Nebraska. And but my father's only vice. This I'll talk about that. He was a smoker, okay, and that took a toll on his lungs early on. And this is before it was official that it caused health problems. But anyway, he was a heavy smoker, and I remember once he took me golfing at the country club there, and the first hole was like a 250-yard. It was par 5. There was bunkers and things like that, and it was a long stretch, and it had been pretty dry in Columbus for a couple of years, and so the fairway was really dry, and my dad hit it smack dab in the middle of the fairway. Just beautiful swing. It's just it was gorgeous. And of course, it took me about 5 strokes to get up to where he was. But we met sort of in the middle of the fairway, and before he took his next shot, which incidentally landed almost on the green. It was very impressive. But anyway, I remember him setting up to take his second swing to get closer to the green. I think he used like a 3-iron, and he was smoking, and he threw his cigarette down, didn't step on it or anything, did the swing, and then we both moved on toward the green. Well, he parred eventually. Okay, he did it, and then the second hole was around a stand of trees that separated the first fairway from the second fairway, which came back around the other way. And so we set up to do the second hole. And as we were passing, I could see through the trees that the first fairway was on fire. And my dad had set fire to the first hole of the fairway. I mean, it was blazing like a prairie fire. And so I had to run to the clubhouse and alert them that the first fairway was on fire. And they asked me, "Was your dad smoking?" And I said, "Yeah, everybody smokes," kind of. And then it dawned on me, Dad set fire to the country club. And that was the last time he ever golfed at that country club. He quit the country club after that, too. He didn't get in trouble or anything else, but he was so terribly embarrassed. Anyway, didn't know very much about my dad's life, and what I did know is what I heard directly from him, which in the last couple of years I found, I joined the Ancestry.com kind of thing, and with the genetics and everything else. And I started to find out about his family and information that I hadn't have heard from him. And I talk about my dad both in My Life with the Spirits and in Low Magic, and I'm going to read a little bit of that, and I'm going to update you on a few of the family secrets that I've learned. In book or chapter 4 of Low Magic, if you don't have low magic, what you're missing. Some people in the magical community place a great deal of importance on their magical ancestry. This is not surprising because the romance and mythos of our spiritual art is certainly enhanced by the thought that we might in fact be a special breed, set apart from ordinary people by the very blood in our veins. I believe that in and of itself is an attitude that can be quite harmless enough. After all, who of us wouldn't like to think we're, even by tradition, descended from a Merlin or a Morgan Le Fay or a Cagliostro or an Aleister Crowley? Taken too seriously, however, such preoccupation with magical bloodlines can easily seduce us into blindingly abandoning our common sense and embracing a form of magical elitism just as foolish and dangerous as any other name-your-own supremacy. Please don't misunderstand me. I fully recognize the fact that a few of us actually have parents who studied and practiced magic or witchcraft, and that they too may have had parents who did the same. For most of us, however, the magic we've inherited from our parents or grandparents is something less overtly magical than that determined by our family's participation in generational covens, satanic cults, or initiatory societies. In fact, I believe that we can discover more about our magical blood of our ancestors by simply examining their lives and characters than we can by analyzing their professed spiritual interests. I wager that if we gave it a little thought, we could find the magician in our parents and grandparents and be able to trace that magic, whether for good or ill, to our own lives and personalities. I certainly can. As a matter of fact, if you wish to become a wise and well-rounded magician, you'll sooner or later have to come to terms with both the good and evil locked in the DNA of our own family's secrets. Okay, then I talk about my mother for a while. We'll save that for Mother's Day. Again, my father was a different kind of magician altogether. He was different than my mother. He was a quiet, moody Scorpio given to bouts of depression. He liked to drink during the years before I was born, but Mom's willingness to drive to his favorite after-work watering hole and physically pull him off his bar stool and out to the car put an end to that. Dad didn't talk much about his parents and family other than to say he had one sister and 3 half-sisters, all older than he. To my knowledge, he never met any of his grandparents. His father came from France. Now, this is what my father told me, and this is what I still believed 10 years ago when I wrote this book. He was born in Quebec. He's a French Canadian. But for some reason, he did go to France. And for some reason, he entered the United States not from Canada, but from France. At least that's currently my understanding. Very strange. We don't know why he emigrated from either place, though. His mother came from England, and this is absolutely true. She had been married once before and had 3 girls from that union. Her father, and this is what my father told me at the time, and I'll correct this, her father was an inspector for Scotland Yard, who died during the events of Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. Well, that's only half correct. Her father was Clifford Catton Harland. Clifford Harland was the most famous private detective of the era. London private detective. He worked most of his cases finding the parents and the relatives of the thousands of fallen women in London. Okay. Sex workers had absolutely no rights. They died at 15 years old and things. It was monstrous. It was nightmarish. And he was hired by the then very influential, very rich Salvation Army. And since I had written this, I'd looked him up, newspaper articles. Some say that it was right during the creation of the characters for the Sherlock Holmes, the idea of a private detective, because Scotland Yard did jack shit to find these women. But anyway, he's a famous guy. Okay, and there's lots of newspaper articles about him and things like that, complete with his picture or those newspaper drawings and stuff. Okay, the only thing we know about Grandma DuQuette's mother was a story that I find somewhat unnerving, and her name was Marion Aldrich, her maiden name was. Something my mother didn't tell me until a week or so before she died in 2007. I was almost 60 years old when I heard this tale, and I know why she waited. My father was born and raised in Los Angeles, but had traveled to western Nebraska in the late 1930s to drill exploratory oil wells. He met my mother-to-be, a waitress at a diner, and they married in the little town of Chapel, Nebraska in 1940. When the newlyweds returned home to California, my father was stunned to discover that while he had been away, his father, that's Joseph Oliver DuQuette, his father had died and was buried, and his mother lay dying in the hospital. When they visited the poor woman, she asked to talk alone with her new daughter-in-law. Now, this is how my mother, very close to her own deathbed, told me the tale. She asked my mother-to-be if she planned to have children. When Mom answered in the affirmative, the old woman pleaded with her to reconsider. Don't have his children. We are cursed. There is evil in our blood. She then tearfully confessed that her own mother was a, quote, witch. Now, I think here I must pause and point out, for this woman, born in the late 1880s, the word witch did not refer to a person who wholesomely embraced the life-affirming, earth-centered worship of today's neo-pagan movement. Instead, it referred to someone who delighted in doing evil things for evil's sake. She then went on to relate how her mother fed on the hate and fear and misery of others, how she would sit on the steps of her London flat and curse passers-by, especially pregnant women, then later delight in reports of their miscarriages and deaths during childbirth. She poisoned dogs and cats. She spread vile rumors about neighbors and relatives for no other purpose than that of ruining lives. So hated and feared was she that in the neighborhood that no child was allowed to play with her children. And if not for the fact that her husband was a policeman, well, in this case, an already famous detective, the family would have been run out of the neighborhood. Now, obviously, her husband was busy all the time, sometimes traveling overseas to track down relatives and things. So he wasn't home very much. And when he was, it sounds like she was batshit crazy and not pleasant to live around. None of my father's 4 sisters had any children. Now, I've since, with ancestry, one of them had a child, and it looks like a perfectly normal situation. Perhaps they were warded off by tales of evil blood. My mother, on the other hand, was a different creature altogether. When I asked her if Grandma DuQuette's warning hadn't scared us, she coldly answered, "No. Where would you and Mark be if I'd listened? I wasn't going to let that old witch tell me what to do." Okay. And I go on. I must confess that at times I can be possessed by a disturbing, dark, and hateful nature. When I perceive that I've been wronged, when someone cuts me off on the freeway, when I hear or observe the mistreatment of other people or animals or my country or my planet, I become so overwhelmed with the most monstrous, blood-curdling images of what I would do to such people if they were at my mercy in some fantasy torture chamber, that I have to use every weapon in my mystical arsenal to force myself back and calm down. At times like this, I'm mindful of a great grandmother who poisoned people's cats and delighted in the news of miscarriages. For all appearances, this curse skipped my father, and in fact, my father was blessed with the most kind and noble character. It was obvious he stayed married to Mom for the welfare and safety of Mark, my brother, and me. His spirituality was centered upon the simple belief in a generic supreme being. After all, he was a Freemason. And his belief in the fundamental goodness of human beings. He took the time to instill in his sons a confidence that we could do anything we put our minds to. He taught us the magic of dreams and imagination, and that it was possible to work to make our dreams come true. Like a good Scorpio Freemason, he taught us by means of magical secrets. So now, after you've patiently endured my ponderous Freudian excursions into my mother's sorcery, I finally come to the true family secrets, the title of this chapter initially promised to you. Okay, then we go on about wonderful things my father did teach me of a very, very positive nature. Well, I had more or less planned to also read you a few paragraphs on from another book, an earlier book, about my father's ghost. Shortly after he died, he made an appearance. But perhaps I'll save that for another time, because we've already gone pretty much over on our Sunday school. Anyway, Constance and I are going to talk this afternoon at 418 Lodge OTO. We're going to talk about the Minerval initiation to some newly made and veteran Minervals. Anyway, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.